Have you ever wanted to trade Pokemon between English and Japanese Generation 1 Pokemon games? Well, now you can, but you need a few things first. Of course, the first thing you're going to need are the games. In my case, I have an English copy of Pokemon Yellow and a Japanese copy of Pokemon Green, aka Pocket Monsters Midori. The next thing you need are two Game Boys. This should theoretically work with the Game Boy Color as well, but the wiring might be a little bit different. So in this demonstration, I'm going to be using these DMG Game Boys. The next thing you need is a link cable that you're willing to sacrifice in order to make connections to the Arduino. In my case, I have this DMG04 link cable. As you can see, I cut it in half, so there's two parts to it. And at the end, I soldered the exposed wires to some other wires to make it easy to plug into the Arduino. In the future, I'll look into making a breakout board like the one that exists for the Game Boy Color, so that way you don't have to sacrifice your link cable. The last thing you need is an Arduino. In my case, I'm using the Arduino Uno R3, but this should work with other variations as well. So the Arduino is running a program that I wrote that handles the exchange of information between the Game Boys, and whenever it gets to any information that would cause corruption on the other Game Boy, it swaps it out with text that is encoded in a language that the Game Boy understands. I'm going to get into more specifics about this data when I get to the trading portion. So now let's wire this up. All right, it's all wired up. So I'm going to call this wire Game Boy A. I'm going to call this one Game Boy B. So we have the blue wires connected to ground on our Arduino, and then we have the clock, the serial in and serial out for Game Boy A connected to pins 2, 3, and 4. Then we have the clock, the serial in and serial out for Game Boy B connected to pins 5, 6, and 7. So that is the configuration that I have for the connections to the Arduino. Let's get into the trading. All right, I booted both games up and I'm ready to trade. This is Game Boy A. It's running an English Pokemon game, in my case, Pokemon Yellow. This is Game Boy B. It's running a Japanese Pokemon game, in my case, Pocket Monsters Midori. So the order is important. Game Boy A needs to be running an English Pokemon game. Game Boy B needs to be running a Japanese Pokemon game. Game Boy A is connected to pins 2, 3, and 4 on the Arduino. This one is connected to pins 5, 6, and 7. Do not get them mixed up, it will corrupt your data. All right, so now let's get into the actual process of trading. So the Arduino is currently running my program. As you can see, the LED is lighting up, which indicates that it's generating a clock signal. So what I'm gonna do is reset it by pressing this button right here. And then I have 15 seconds to connect each Game Boy. So now I'm connecting Game Boy A, and then connecting Game Boy B. So now they're connected. Then after 15 seconds, the light should come back on, just like that. So now we can trade. So now I'm going to go through the standard process, talk to the NPC. There we go. Now let's start the trade. So there we go. So we exchanged party information, and now on the left side, on the English game, you can see I have Mac, and then I have Saito. On the right side, I have Saito, then I have Maku. So what the Arduino does is it stores the name that needs to be transmitted to each Game Boy for each language, and then it associates that with a trainer ID. And when it comes to Pokemon, it does the same, where it has a list of all the default Pokemon names for the English game and also for Japanese. So for example, for Dragonite, over here you can see on the Japanese Game Boy, if I go to Dragonite, it's Kairyu, which is the Japanese name of Dragonite, and I can view the stats. As you can see, the stats all match up. On the right side, I have Maku, which is of course me because it's my Dragonite on the left side. Yeah. As you can see, all the moves line up, the EXP, so all the data transmitted properly. So of course, because the name gets overridden with the default Pokemon name based on the language, that means if there are any nicknames, they will be swapped out by the default Pokemon name based on the name in the Pokedex. But that's fine because you can just go to the nickname rater, and I believe you can just set the nickname again. So I'd rather just be able to do that than have it corrupt your save, right? So now let's trade. So I'm gonna trade my Dragonite, aka Kairyu, for this Sanda, which is Zapdos. So this Sanda right here, and then I view that over here. You can see all the data lines up, and over here the trainer name is Saito, and it's a Zapdos. So now I'm gonna trade my Dragonite for that Sanda. And there we go, now let's trade. So the trade actually isn't final until it says trade complete. So this entire animation, no data is actually being transmitted. It only actually does the swap whenever it says trade complete. There we go. Trade complete. And it's gonna re-exchange information, and now we're back here. So now you can see on the right side, I have my Kairyu. On the left side, I have my Zapdos. And there's no corruption in a name or in a trainer name, everything is good. So now let's exit the trade. And then I'm gonna put this Game Boy down, and I should have the Zapdos in my party now. There it is. Cool. So one thing worth noting is that the program isn't completely perfect. There are times where you might get stuck on a please wait screen and it just kind of sits there. And at that point, the best thing you can do is just try again, because it is a little bit inconsistent, but when it does work, it works really well. So that's just a disclaimer. Overall, this was a really fun project to work on. I was able to brush up on my soldering skills, solidify my knowledge of communication protocols. I learned how to use a logic analyzer to capture and decode digital signals. I learned a little bit more about the various data structures in Pokemon and how some of that data gets saved in SRAM. I took a slight detour to learn assembly for Gameboys, so that way I could look at the disassembly projects for Pokemon Yellow to see what the game does under the hood. I also used this project to help complete the Pokedex in Pokemon Yellow, because as you know, there's quite a few Pokemon you just can't get in Yellow that you can get in Red, Blue, and Green. So that was incredibly useful, and now my Pokedex is complete in Yellow, so this project was really perfect for that. So overall, a really fun project. If you'd like to know what led me down this rabbit hole, whenever I was at a convention, I bought this copy of Pocket Monsters Gin for like about $15, which I thought was kind of crazy because, I mean, even if it's a Japanese language, I thought, you know, these Pokemon can still help to complete the Pokedex in an English game, right? And then I looked it up, and apparently you can't do that, otherwise you might corrupt your saves. So I was like, there's no way. I mean, just, you know, fix the bytes, fix the data, so that way you could trade between the regions or between the Japanese and English games. But I didn't see that anyone did that yet. So I was like, you know, I've been playing around with our Arduino, maybe I could do it, and here we are. So yeah, that's the background to how I got here. So I guess if anyone uses this and it helps them trade Pokemon between English and Japanese games, you know, just let me know. It'll be glad to hear from people if this actually helps people out in completing their Pokedex. So I think that covers everything. So I guess I'll end the video here. Later.